Well, it has been a long journey, but finally we are at the last module, suspicious transactions. Section 28 gives us reportable obligations under FICA. The first obligation is a cash transaction obligation, and this is anything above a prescribed limit, which is presently set at R24,999.99. This must be reported to the Financial Intelligence Center. Now, this transaction is aggregated. That means that it's over a 24-hour period. So if somebody puts in 6,000, 7,000, 12,000, and 13,000, although each one of them is underneath 24,999 Rand and 99 cents, you would have to report it as an aggregated transaction. Cash includes not only coin and paper money, but also travelers' checks. And the report must include the date and time of the transaction, or in the case of a series of transactions, the time of each of those transactions in that time period. Transfer of monies from the Republic on the instructions of a client or receipts of monies on behalf of a client in excess of 3,000 Rand per day or 10,000 per calendar month must also be reported. The report must contain full particulars in respect to the natural or legal person making the report or other entity on whose behalf the report is made, of the name of the person or entity, the identifying particulars of the person or entity such as identity number, registration number, or practice number, for example, the address of the person or entity, the type of business or economic sector of the accountable institution and reporting institution, and in the case of a natural person, the person's contact particulars, and in the case of a legal person or entity, the surname and the contact particulars of the contact person. Section 28A is quite a serious section, and it covers any entity which has committed or attempted to commit a specified offence as defined in Pacta Torah. Now, Pacta Torah, if you recall, is the Protection of Constitutional Democracy Against Terrorist and Related Activities Act 33 of 2004. And Section 28A came into operation on Friday, the 20th of May 2005. And Pacta Torah amended Section 29 of the Financial Intelligence Center Act to extend the reporting of suspicious and unusual transactions to also cover property which is connected to an offence resulting or relating to the financing of terrorist and related activities. Now, this report has to be made to the Financial Intelligence Center. What is an entity in terms of Pacta Torah? Well, the President can identify such an entity and issue a notice in terms of Section 25 of Pacta Torah. The report has to be made on the FIC website or sent to the FIC within 5 working days, and it's normally done by your money laundering reporting officer. You cannot proceed any further with that transaction unless so instructed by the Financial Intelligence Center, due to the fact that this is a terrorist transaction. Section 29 gives us the duty to report any suspicious or unusual transactions. Now, the duty to report such a transaction is not restricted to an accountable or reporting institution or even to the employees of that institution, but is borne by any person who carries on or is in charge of or manages or is employed by any business which is not necessarily an accountable or reporting institution. Now, this report is required by the Financial Intelligence Center within 15 days after you've acquired the knowledge or the suspicion arose. The reporting duties apply if you know or ought reasonably to have known or suspected that the business is about to receive or has received the proceeds of money laundering, illegal activities, or property which is connected to an offence relating to the financing of terrorism or related activities, or the business has facilitated or is likely to facilitate the transfer of proceeds of unlawful activities or property which is connected to an offence relating to the financing of terrorism or related activities, or a transaction which the business is party to but has no apparent lawful or business purpose, or was made in order to avoid having to make the required reports. That's possibly one which is your 24,999 Rand and 99 cents per day report. That would be a suspicious transaction. And any transaction that might be relevant to the investigation of tax evasion or any attempted evasion. And finally, any transaction that relates to an offence relating to the financing of terrorism or related activities. So what do you do when confronted with a suspicious transaction? Well, first of all, think of the questions that the money laundering reporting officer is going to ask you and try and ask those questions. Don't try and tip the customer off. That would be bad. But you need to ask those questions to convince yourself that this is a suspicious transaction or to make yourself aware that this could be one. It might be a perfectly normal transaction that the person has just gone about it rather strangely. So you need to ask those questions. Try and find out where the money is coming from. However, don't interrogate your customer. If the customer doesn't want to provide the information, just proceed with the transaction. Don't do anything that makes your customer suspicious. This applies also to other staff. Don't try and make them suspicious when you are dealing with this customer. And certainly don't go and speak with them and discuss your suspicions with them, because the staff member might also tip off the customer. Treat your information and your suspicion as confidential and report the transaction as soon as possible. Let's have a look at the legislation for suspicious transactions again. Section 27 creates the reporting duties for all accountable institutions and says that we have to make the reports to the centre. Section 28 gives us the cash transactions above the 24,999 Rand and 99 cents, which is called the prescribed limit. And these are to be reported to the centre. And this includes both transactions where the accountable institution pays out a certain amount and where the amount of money deposited is above the prescribed limit. Section 29, all suspicious and unusual transactions are to be reported to the centre. And sections 30 and 31 deals with the transfer of cash to or from the Republic of Southern Africa, and it's to be reported by all accountable institutions to a person authorized by the minister. And this applies to electronic transfers to or from this republic. And this amount is set at 3,000 Rand a day or 10,000 Rand per month. Section 34 tells us that the centre has the power to intervene and direct an accountable institution not to proceed with a transaction if it's involving money laundering or proceeds of crime. Continuing into our legislation with regard to suspicious transactions, Section 38 says authorized persons who make reports in terms of this law are protected as long as they've complied with the requirement of good faith. Now, good faith means that you haven't made this declaration with any ulterior motive. So, for instance, if you've decided that you're going to report your significant other for money laundering because you know that they've been getting extra money in, that would not be good faith, even though it would have been a report that's been made correctly. Section 39 says all reports made to the centre are admissible evidence in court. So any report you make can go to court. Section 40 says access to information held by the centre is limited. So only investigating authorities inside South Africa, the South African Revenue Service and intelligence centres can be provided with such information. Sections 51 and 52 make an offence of the failure to report a cash transaction above a prescribed limit or unusual transactions which give rise to a reasonable suspicion of money laundering or unlawful activities. Section 53 also states that if anyone who makes an unauthorized disclosure of information is guilty of an offence, and that's the tipping off offence. So what do you do when you're confronted with a suspicious transaction? Well, you proceed with the transaction in a courteous way. You don't know if the customer is really guilty of any offence, and you need to treat them with respect and courtesy. You should proceed with the transaction, even though you may find it unusual or suspicious. If the customer wants to do several transactions, carry on providing the service as you normally would. Don't let them know that this is going to give them a report, and then immediately report the suspicious or unusual transaction. When you are reporting, it is best to put as much information as possible on your forms, because your compliance officers or your money laundering reporting officers are going to have to look at this suspicious transaction. They need to know as much as possible. Normally you do have forms which most companies keep for such reports. These can normally be got from your money laundering control officers or from your compliance officers. Fill it in add the details, and attach your IDs and your client identification documentation or your know your client documentation, and then send it off to your money laundering reporting officer, and remembering that they have to get this report in very strict time frames. So do it as soon as possible, preferably the same day that you became aware of the transaction. Well, finally we've come to an end, and I think it's important for us to state that we need to have the processes and procedures to identify, record, and report matters concerning the Financial Intelligence Center in place. Failure to do so can lead to substantial fines of 100 million rand and imprisonment of 15 years. But not only that, it could also lead to reputational damage. Each one of us has a part to play in helping to combat crime, and the Financial Intelligence Center Act and suspicious reporting definitely gives us that method. I hope you've enjoyed this program, and I hope you'll look at the other programs on Go One from Naked Minds. Not all of them are quite so heavy as this one. But either way, I really and truly hope that you will have a blessed and prosperous future as you put in place the knowledge that you've learned in this course. Thank you very much for your attendance. I hope you will do the assessments. Have a wonderful day. Bye.